What do the iconic games Stalker and the Russia-Ukraine war have in common? Besides the radioactive red forest where Russians thought digging trenches was a genius idea. Duh. And the answer is this. We've played through the entire Stalker series and found a surprising number of weapons that made the leap from virtual reality to the Ukrainian front. But the real question is, can this equipment withstand actual combat? Let's dive in. First up, the BMP-2. You'll find scattered across the zone of exclusion if you spend a few evenings playing Stalker 2. Here's how it looks in the game, and here's what happens to it in a real firefight. In this case, after a direct hit from Ukrainian forces, the Russian crew didn't stand a chance. In another instance, we see a more even match. Russian and Ukrainian BMP-2s going head-to-head. The Ukrainians fired first, causing the Russian crew to panic, kill the engine, and flee. The result? Ukraine's armed forces gained one fully functional BMP, now ready to fire in the opposite direction. Here's what a Ukrainian soldier had to say about that. Russians, hold on. We're coming for you in your own gear. Also in Stalker 2, you might stumble upon a rusty BMP being dragged by a tractor. Ring a bell? We've all seen those embarrassing moments from the early days of the invasion haunting the Russians, even in games. Now, let's bring out the big guns. What do you think happens when an old T-64 from Stalker Clear Sky encounters a modern FPV drone? If you're guessing a tragic end for the tank, you're absolutely right. This footage from Ukrainian drone operators shows exactly the fate awaiting such Russian scrap metal. Even the Russians themselves realize that, outside of video games, such outdated tech is only good for kamikaze missions. They've started packing old MTLBs and tanks with TNT and sending them forward towards Ukrainian positions for remote detonation. The problem? These contraptions often blow up before they even get close. Take this poor, aging T-55 for example. Sent to destroy a Ukrainian stronghold. Its fate was sealed by an RPG-7 straight out of Stalker 2. A precise shot by Ukrainian infantry ignited the TNT inside, leading to a massive detonation. The RPG-7 isn't just a fan favorite in Stalker, it's a devastatingly effective tool in real life, especially when used creatively. Take these Ukrainians for instance, who converted an RPG-7 warhead into a loitering munition by attaching it to an FPV platform. Stay tuned because the fusion of creativity, classic weapons, and modern tech on the battlefield is proving to be the ultimate game changer. This clever upgrade extended the RPG-7's range to 9 miles, while reducing risks for Ukrainian infantry. Now, to hit a Russian tank, the operator doesn't even need to leave cover. In Stalker Call of Pripyat, you might also come across a drone resembling the American MQ-1 Predator. Unfortunately, we can't show you one in action on the battlefield yet. Ukraine doesn't currently have such high-tech weaponry in its arsenal. But hit like on this video if you'd like to see one deployed on the Ukrainian front, frying even more Russian armored vehicles. Ever wondered why the Stalker zone is littered with rusty, unusable equipment? The answer isn't obvious, so let's go back to 1986, when the Chernobyl disaster occurred. To handle the catastrophe, the USSR mobilized both civilian and military infrastructure. After the cleanup mission, all the machinery underwent decontamination. Some was buried, while other equipment was left at open storage sites. But why wasn't it reused? A real-life Stalker provides the best explanation. You place a dosimeter on the treads, and it just goes wild. Imagine the radiation levels here. Now, think about how much higher the radiation levels would have been 38 years ago. This posed a direct threat to soldiers' lives. As a result, the government decided to scrap the equipment at a cost of $46 million. What do you think would have happened to Soviet weapons in a nuclear conflict during the Cold War? While you ponder that, let's move on to our next discovery. Meet the BTR-70, an old Soviet armored personnel carrier featured in every Stalker game. In the 1990s, Ukraine had about 850 of these vehicles in its arsenal. The BTR-70 is highly maneuverable, but lacks solid armor and advanced weaponry. As real-world experience shows, both sides have suffered losses involving these APCs. To reduce future risks, Ukrainians have modernized their vehicles wherever possible. This led to the creation of the BTR-3, followed by other equally interesting models. One unusual modification appears in the hands of the Russian Volunteer Corps, fighting as part of Ukraine's armed forces. During a raid into Russian territory, footage surfaced of Russian Volunteer Corps fighters riding a BTR-70M equipped with the Paras combat module. featuring a remotely operated gun. This vehicle left a mark on Putin's forces. During the raid, its gun destroyed a Russian BTR-82A, which the Russian Volunteer Corps fighters then captured. One lucky driver of the captured APC shared his excitement. "My dad told me to train as a tractor driver, but I ended up in the military." Now, this BTR fights on the side of Ukraine, delivering losses to the villains. As a football referee might say, 1-0 in favor of the RVC against the FSB. Did you know that real Ukrainian soldiers worked on the development of Stalker? For example, Volodymyr Yezhov, a game designer on Stalker Clear Sky, not only shaped the zone, but also became a prototype for Loki, a character in Stalker Call of Pripyat. In 2022, Yezhov joined the military. Here's what his brother said about that time. "We agreed that I would evacuate our mother, his wife, and pets from Kyiv, while he stayed behind to defend Ukraine. In May, Volodymyr was killed near Bakhmut. Thankfully, his creativity and passion live on through his work. The main character from Clear Sky even has a storyline in Heart of Chernobyl, played and voiced by a soldier from the Azov regiment known by the call sign Say. His brigade commander personally allowed him to leave the front lines temporarily to work on the project. Comrade Radis gave the green light, so I went to Kyiv. This is how Say's character appears in the game. The dark side of the zone, but there's also a bright side. It's all around us. We just can't see it. We hope that thanks to these games, the memory of this fallen developer will never fade. Through his work, Ukrainians can not only play their favorite games, but also live in peaceful cities. Speaking of Stalker, it's impossible not to mention another type of Soviet equipment, this time from the skies. That haunting sound overhead? It's the Mii-24. Now imagine what a Russian soldier feels like when a Ukrainian crocodile unloads rockets at them. Wait, you don't have to imagine. We'll show you. In eastern Ukraine, a Russian convoy tried to cross a river, only to be intercepted by a pair of Mii-24s. But before we show you the result, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It'll mean the world to us. Here's how one Russian described the airstrike. "There's more coming." And indeed, the next volley of unguided rockets didn't take long to arrive. The Mi-24 is Ukraine's primary attack helicopter. Its main mission? Fire support for advancing infantry. A helicopter is like mobile artillery. It can also transport troops and cargo. Here's how a Ukrainian pilot, callsign Viking, recalls his most intense flight. "During the Kyiv campaign, we were flying troops for defense missions using night vision goggles. We were in the air from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. After that, I couldn't see properly for 3 or 4 months. To avoid Russian air defenses, Viking had to fly at dangerously low altitudes. The lowest I ever flew? 3 feet. Circumstances pinned me to the ground. I saw it on the camera. Both sides are heavily equipped with man-pads, making combat aviation extremely risky. Pilots fly low and put their lives on the line because they know their support is vital to those on the ground. Unfortunately, not every crew makes it back. For one Russian Mi-24 crew, their encounter with an American man-pads was their last. A Ukrainian soldier recounts, "I heard the helicopter's noise and immediately prepared to engage. I fired the first shot. Direct hit." We've made a special episode about the Stinger system, which has been hunting Russian aircraft and protecting Ukrainian skies since 2022. Click the link in the upper right corner to learn more. Experienced stalkers know the zone offers plenty of firearms to test out on mutants. In the Russia-Ukraine war, there are no mutants, but there are hundreds of FPV drones. Both sides are constantly seeking ways to counter them. Fighters from the 3rd Assault Brigade tried shooting down a drone on a training range, using both AK rifles and shotguns. Here's how it turned out. They scored some hits, but I wouldn't bet on the rifle. A shotgun is clearly the more reliable option. The Russians, being true to form, couldn't resist stealing even this idea. Here's how they trained to dodge roll and knock down drones by throwing their rifles. But as this video proves, their exercises don't seem to help much in actual combat. The Russians also showcased their version of a drone killer. Equipped with a hunting shotgun, a Bulat UAV signal detector, and a portable electronic warfare system. Instead of magazines, we carry power banks. That's how this war is, a Russian soldier shares, but whether this gear will actually help him remains an open question. This war has repeatedly shown that even old Soviet equipment can be either a devastating weapon or just tons of unusable scrap metal. It all depends on the soldier's skill and the hard work of the mechanics who maintain it. We hope that in the future, Ukraine will fully transition to Western weaponry, leaving all the Soviet junk on the battlefield where it belongs, in computer games like Stalker or Battlefield. Have you played these masterpieces? Which of these games do you think better captures the atmosphere of real combat? Let us know in the comments.